waiting for you.
We've been waiting for you.
Where the kisses are heard.
You watch?
Me?
I watch you.
Give and take.
That's how it works around here, Sparky.
Knight Rider, a shadowy...
What's going on, everyone? It's LJ, and it's time
for a rock and metal update!
What's going on, everyone? It's LJ, and it seems tremendously fitting that video number 400 be dedicated to what is hands down my favorite type of video to film, a rock and metal update. Let's kickstart it. Let's start off with some prime new wave of British heavy metal, Jameson Raid. This is a high roller release, and it consists of things like singles the band had released, demo material, practice material, live material, session material. It's just a big old compilation of everything that high roller could get their hands on. Typical high roller fashion comes with no end of extras. Came with a book that you can read through, full of photos, full of detail, full of information. I love these types of releases. These obscure, flew under the radar new wave of British heavy metal bands that just didn't make a dent, a crack, make a slew of albums, but the material is fantastic. It's on standard black vinyl, and at some point the band kind of gives up what they have and fans provide what they have, and the label releases just this big one-for-all kind of package, compilation, gift of everything they can get their hands on. This comes with a 7-inch single as well, with Do It the Hard Way, Never Again, and Goodbye Live. And what it does a lot of times is it reinvigorates the band, if they're all still alive and available, and to get going again and do some new stuff. And that's exactly what happened with Jameson Raid. They ended up doing a gig at the O2 Arena in London, and I believe picking up, not with a new album, but with another compilation. And I think it had some new tracks on it as well. So you can see this is just packed to the absolute point of inevitable ringwear with material. But what a brilliant, fantastic album. There really is no bad track here. If you dig your real, authentic, under the radar new wave of British heavy metal, check that album out. So let's stick on the new wave of British heavy metal vein. Here is 1982's Split Beaver, When Hell Won't Have You. Split Beaver released one album, and this is it. As far as new wave of British heavy metal goes, this is kind of like the Gods meet AC/DC, and they invite Nazareth over and Saxon, and they get the deal done. So there's definitely some traditional new wave of British heavy metal here, a lot of it actually. But there's also some boogie and blues rock kind of numbers, which is where the AC/DC influence kind of comes in. This is an original pressing on Heavy Metal Records, and these just do not turn up all that often anymore. Normally when you're holding something on Heavy Metal Records, you know you got a winner, and this is no exception. If it's something that you see in the wild, this is a UK pressing, make sure you grab it if you dig new wave of British heavy metal. It's a killer album. So let's continue on and close out that path. Here's an album that I picked up early last year, and for no good reason, never showed. And it is August Redmoon's Fools Are Never Alone. This is a 5-track EP that plays at 45 RPM. I didn't know that when I first put the needle on. I was like, hey, wait a minute. Hey, there we go! This is just straightforward, like the cover would imply, meat and potatoes new wave of British heavy metal. With only 5 songs, it's a perfect length, and there's no room for filler, which is great because there is none. August Redmoon ended up dumping one member, and a few years later, they reformed for another one-and-done band, and that is Eden. Little more commercial, little more hair metal than August Redmoon, but again, just another perfect example, prime example of an under-the-radar new wave of British heavy metal band. Now, in the last update, I showed you Alpha Tiger's Man or Machine, their debut album that I finally found on vinyl, and it's been in huge rotation. In that same video, I told you in the next update, I would show you their second album, which I found late last year, and that is Beneath the Surface. It's a 2 LP set, which as usual is unnecessary because there's a few songs on each side and you're constantly getting up to flip it. But I'll forgive it on the back of the fact that it is a killer album. If you want to think of Alpha Tiger like Queensryche, kind of that same progression, you would think that Man or Machine is kind of a bit like The Warning, and Beneath the Surface is a bit like Operation Mindcrime. So they kind of progressed a little bit, slowed things down a little here and there, but to no fault. Still a killer album. The vocals are off the charts. Amazing musicianship. There's a Loudness and a Riot cover on this album. The whole thing just smokes from start to finish. Amazing, amazing German heavy metal. There's a label, it's just on black vinyl, and their new album Identity is due out in about a month. I can't wait!
Can't wait!
Now here's a new wave of traditional heavy metal band that I am infatuated with. I can't get enough of, and that is Cauldron. Cauldron was formed by lead singer Jason Decay after the demise of his earlier doom metal band Goathorn, which I was never a huge fan of. Cauldron is a 3-piece from Canada, not all that unlike Rush, except they sound completely different from Rush. This came on orange vinyl, which again, not a big deal for me. I'd much rather prefer black, but if I can only get it on orange and that's the way it's gotta be, that's the way it's gotta be. Here's the inner sleeve. Pretty cool shot of the band jamming. In any Cauldron video that you see, be it behind the scenes or an official video, there's always some kind of vinyl album laying around somewhere. They love vinyl, so I love them. It also came with a bonus 7-inch with a couple of songs that weren't on the album, but as far as the album itself, it absolutely rips. Killer solos, killer drums, great sound to the album, and I am a huge fan of Jason Decay's voice. Killer vocals. Check out Nightbreaker on YouTube. Killer video, low budget, done by themselves, just perfect Canadian new wave of traditional heavy metal. Check you out some Cauldron. Another killer new wave of traditional heavy metal band, here is Attic with The Invocation. And this was released on Van Records in 2012. I picked this up late last year as well. The really nice gatefold. And this is King Diamond Merciful Fate worship of the highest order. If you were to combine Merciful Fate's Melissa with King Diamond's Abigail, you would have Attic's The Invocation. Talk about packed to the gills. Here's the book that came with the album. And while I won't be able to fan this out to show you every picture, you get the idea. Here's the inner sleeve and the album, which I took out of the inner sleeve and has custom labels on it. So again, if you dig Merciful Fate, if you dig King Diamond, and you want to hear an album that just combines the best of both worlds, from those unreachably falsettos to those low restrained vocals, Attic is definitely not a band you want to miss. Prepare to be blown away. So here's another high roller release, another, I guess you could call them new wave of traditional heavy metal bands, except they had already released an album in 1991. Now this came out in 2012, so it's a pretty good gig when you can put out 2 albums in 20 years. But I digress, and that's Sleepy Hollow's Skull 13. A very cool album. Total Blind Buy was not at all familiar with it. This one came on clear vinyl, but rarely does High Roller Records steer anyone wrong, and here's the insert that it came with. I am really glad I picked this up. It ended up being an album that has Udo Dirkschneider from Accept like vocals, which are just killer, and I believe the lead singer came from the band Attacker. And it has like a Slayer-ish kind of crunch to it, like South of Heaven, Seasons in the Abyss era kind of crunch. That's the best way I can describe it. It's got an epic closer called Epic, and it kind of nods its head to Rime of the Ancient Mariner from Maiden, in that it kind of goes through all these different hills and valleys, like slower to faster to different tempos, high vocals, low vocals, just a brilliant send-off to an absolutely killer Blind Buy that I'm glad I picked up. Now here's an album that just came out that I could not wait to be released, and that is Night Demon's Curse of the Damned. This is from 2015. Night Demon are a new wave of traditional heavy metal band that just sprung up within the past couple of years in California. This is an absolutely amazing record. I ordered this one from the band's Bandcamp page, and I believe they made 100 or 200 copies on blue vinyl. Now, besides a really crappy shipping job by whoever is shipping records for the band, and they'll have to learn how to improve that, here's the inner sleeve. It's a killer album. So I specifically asked them to ship the vinyl outside of the jacket to make sure there weren't any seam splits on the cover. And you can see that's exactly what would have happened, because there's the top of the inner sleeve, there's the side of the inner sleeve, and don't adjust your TV set. That is my middle finger coming out of all three sides of the inner sleeve. So it was pretty well just tossed in an LP mailer and thrown in the mail, and that was what you got for $6 shipping. So they have a lot to learn about how to ship records, but they have almost nothing to learn about how to make a killer record. This came with a sticker as well. Make no mistake about it, Night Demon is kind of early 80s heavy metal laced with new wave of British heavy metal brilliance, killer solos, blazing bass lines, pounding drums. Absolutely phenomenal album. This has been getting a ton of spin time and definitely something worth checking out. Fantastic job, guys. Just sharpen up on the vinyl mailing skills. Now, this worked out kind of cool. At some point last year, I forget in which update, I showed you that Prosthetic Records had reissued Testaments live at Eindhoven '87. This is the Dynamo Open Air Festival in Holland. What was cool about this is that it was the very first time this entire show had been released on vinyl in its entirety. It had only been available as an EP up until then. An EP which I didn't have, and an EP which turned up in the dollar bin back in October. I was shocked. That was just killer. So this is the original UK pressing on Megaforce of the EP, and it only has, I believe it's 5 songs, and here is the reissue on Prosthetic Records. I believe they made 500 at some point last year, and it was just something to jump on. But still, it's very cool to have the original UK issue of the EP in the collection, and even more cool now that you don't have to be frustrated with it, because you can just listen to the whole show. Next up is an album that I have wanted forever, and it's always an import, and it's always pricey, and condition is always dicey. And that is Faith No More's Live at Brixton Academy. I was a major Faith No More fan back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they released a VHS tape called You Fat Bastards. And this vinyl is exactly that VHS tape. It's a concert. The energy in this set is off the charts. No doubt, in large part due to Mike Patton, who himself at the time was just over the top. Killer set list, tons of material from the album The Real Thing, which is one of the best albums Faith No More ever released, if not the best album Faith No More ever released. This is a Dutch pressing from Holland, and it's phenomenal to finally have this album in the collection. Absolutely amazing, well worth checking out. Available on CDs and import, the VHS of You Fat Bastards. If you dig Faith No More at the absolute peak of their powers, just before Angel Dust and the downhill slide, in my opinion, you've got to check out Live at Brixton. Straight out of 1988, criminally underrated New York, we'll call them a power metal band, Hitt Man. What a phenomenal, phenomenal album. Similar to Crimson Glory vocally, and MTV Metal from a musicianship perspective. This was amazing. An album I never expected to own. Again, classic 80s release. This is on RC, or Roadrunner Overseas, and it's a typical classic RC Roadrunner release in that the production is amazing. It just sounds fantastic. If you dig Crimson Glory, if you dig mid to late 80s Queensryche, and you dig MTV Metal, like Dokken kind of musicianship, you would eat this album right up. It was absolutely fantastic. I was thrilled to finally add it to the collection. Speaking of Queensryche, straight out of Seattle, oh Seattle, the things that you gave us that were brilliant before grunge took over, like Heir Apparent. And this is Heir Apparent's second and final album from 1989. Amazing front cover. What a goofy medieval fair kind of looking back cover. Who was in charge of this? A brilliant album, absolutely fantastic. Released on Capitol, so if it wasn't for the cool album cover, it might be something you actually overlook, because the label does nothing for it. Very, very cool late Queensryche vibe, kind of like Empire mixed up with Promised Land, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But the funny thing about that is while they got labeled a Queensryche clone, they had that sound in '89 before Queensryche even got there. And any US power metal type band that's willing to cover Simon and Garfunkel's Sounds of Silence and nail it is worth your time. So let's wrap it up with a private press from 1986 and show you just how incestuous the industry really is. Here is White Tiger's only and self-titled album, White Tiger. Now, let's find some connections here. Some Kiss connections, of course. This is Mark St. John's band. Mark St. John played with Kiss on Animalize. We all know that. He even played with them live a couple of times, but he had some issues, so not too often. Here is Mark St. John's little brother, Michael Norton, because Mark St. John is really Mark Norton, and Michael Norton is Mark St. John's little brother. And he plays bass on the album, but he was also Mark's guitar tech in Kiss. Ah, but the connections don't stop there. No. So here is lead singer David Donato. Just as a cool aside, David Donato was part of Black Sabbath just for some demos right around the time after Born Again was released in '83. And here is, I forgot his name, Brian James Fox on drums. Brian James Fox, good drummer, and he also showed up on, some of you are familiar with this, Silent Rage. So, Brian James Fox is back as Brian James. He dropped the box. Lose the box! Now the connection there is Silent Rage is released on Gene Simmons Records. So connections all over the place. As far as the album itself, it's just one that I was thrilled to add to the collection late last year. And it's just got that, not really the Kiss vibe, it's got more of a, like an Ace Frehley's Comet kind of vibe. But if you think that's got a Kiss vibe too, then so does this. It's just perfect period mid-80s glam metal. It's a really cool album with lots of Kiss connections and other band connections that just goes to show how incestuous the industry really is. And that's it. Hope you all dug it. Thanks everyone for watching, for tuning in. Thanks for the support over the course of the last 400 videos. What a journey. Let's keep rolling. Talk to you guys in the next video. Later.